My name is Sarah Jenkins. I'm 38 years old, and I'm a senior operations manager. The fluorescent lights of the executive boardroom hummed, reflecting off the polished mahogany table, making the tension in the room almost visible. Mr. Harrison, our CEO, leaned back in his chair, a forced smile playing on his lips, but his eyes were like chips of ice as they landed on me. He'd just finished a long, winding monologue about team players and positive attitudes. My stomach tightened, knowing what was coming. And then there are those, he said, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper, who, despite their best intentions, become a drag on progress, a threat to our momentum. You, Sarah, he pointed a perfectly manicured finger at me, are a liability. The words hung in the air, heavy and humiliating, echoing slightly in the sudden silence of the room. My jaw clenched, a tiny muscle twitching in my cheek. I met his gaze, refusing to look away, a quiet resolve hardening inside me. He thought he'd broken me, that he'd silenced the inconvenient truth I represented. He had no idea what he'd just unleashed. To understand why that moment felt like a punch to the gut, you need to know a little about Harrison and the company, Veridian Solutions. I joined Veridian 5 years ago, drawn by its innovative spirit and the promise of growth. We developed specialized software for logistics and supply chain management, a field I knew inside and out from my previous roles. I thrived on efficiency, on streamlining processes, on finding the tiny cracks before they became chasms. Harrison, on the other hand, was all about presentation. He'd founded the company and had a knack for charming investors and clients, painting grand visions of the future. He was charismatic, always impeccably dressed, and had a way of making you feel like you were part of something truly special. For a long time, I believed it. My role as senior operations manager meant I was deeply involved in the day-to-day workings, from client onboarding to product delivery. I saw the gears turning, the data flowing. I loved the challenge of optimizing, of making things run smoother. Harrison, however, saw my meticulousness as a tendency to overanalyze or get bogged down in details. He valued speed and perceived progress above all else, often pushing for aggressive timelines that, from my perspective, bypassed crucial quality checks and risk assessments. His office, always immaculate, had a series of company-branded mugs, each one gleaming, never a coffee stain in sight. He'd often hold one, half filled with lukewarm tea, as he delivered pronouncements about lean operations that often felt more like reckless shortcuts. The first real crack in my perception of Harrison came about 18 months before that boardroom meeting. We were bidding on a massive contract with a Fortune 500 company, a deal that would double our revenue. I was tasked with mapping out the implementation plan. As I dug into the specifics, I realized our existing infrastructure had significant scaling limitations. If we won the contract as proposed, we'd be overstretched, risking critical delivery failures and potential data breaches due to system overload. I compiled a detailed report, complete with stress test simulations and cost-benefit analyses for necessary upgrades. I presented it to Harrison, expecting a collaborative discussion. He listened, nodding occasionally, then pushed the report back across his desk. "Sarah," he said, picking up one of his pristine Veridian mugs, "I appreciate your thoroughness. Truly. But we can't show weakness to a potential client. We'll simply optimize on the fly. It's about confidence, not caveats." He dismissed my concerns as fear-mongering, assuring me that we'd cross that bridge when we came to it. He even suggested I was being overly negative, implying it wasn't a team player attitude. I left his office feeling a chill, the first hint that my data-driven insights were not welcome if they didn't align with his narrative. We won the contract, and for a few months, we limped along, patching issues as they arose, but the strain was palpable, and client satisfaction metrics began a slow, worrying decline. The situation escalated 6 months later. The optimize on the fly strategy was failing. Our customer support lines were overwhelmed, and a significant percentage of new clients were experiencing service interruptions. I brought it up again, this time with even more data showing the direct correlation between our overloaded systems and the rising churn rate. I proposed a phased upgrade plan, explaining how it could be implemented without disrupting existing clients, but it would require a temporary pause on new large-scale contracts. Harrison, however, was already deep into securing a new round of venture capital funding, and his pitch deck highlighted our rapid growth and aggressive expansion. My data directly contradicted his narrative. He started subtly sidelining me. I was excluded from key strategy meetings where the operational issues were discussed, even though my team was directly impacted. My direct reports started coming to me, confused by conflicting directives from Harrison's newly appointed special projects lead, a young, ambitious guy named Mark who had no operational experience but was excellent at echoing Harrison's optimistic vision. Mark would often present my team's work as his own, and Harrison would praise him effusively in company-wide emails, making no mention of the people who actually did the heavy lifting. I felt like I was being slowly erased, my expertise systematically undermined. What I didn't understand yet was just how deliberate this was. Then came the incident with the Phoenix project. This was Harrison's pet initiative, a new AI-driven analytics platform he promised would revolutionize our industry. He'd poured significant company resources into it, even diverting funds from critical infrastructure maintenance, against my strenuous objections. My team, tasked with integrating Phoenix into our existing systems, discovered a fundamental flaw in its core algorithm. It was generating biased results, skewed by incomplete data sets used during its development. If released, it wouldn't just be ineffective, it would actively mislead our clients, potentially causing them to make disastrous business decisions. I immediately flagged it, providing irrefutable evidence from our testing. Harrison called the emergency boardroom meeting, the one where he called me a liability. He was furious, not about the flaw, but about the delay. "Sarah," he'd hissed at me before the meeting, "you are jeopardizing everything. This is our golden ticket. You need to find a way to make it work, not tear it down." In that meeting, he painted me as an obstructionist, someone who couldn't see the forest for the trees, who was too focused on theoretical imperfections, instead of practical solutions. When he finally delivered the liability comment, it wasn't just an insult, it was a clear signal. He wanted me out. He wanted to silence anyone who dared to question his vision, his methods, or his increasingly reckless decisions. He thought that public humiliation would break me, make me resign quietly, and clear the path for Phoenix. But instead of breaking, something inside me snapped into focus. I recognized the pattern clearly then. Harrison wasn't just a flawed leader, he was actively creating a culture of fear and deception. He wasn't interested in solutions, he was interested in control and maintaining a facade. He was building his empire on shaky ground, and he was willing to sacrifice anyone, and eventually the company itself, to keep the illusion going. My liability was my integrity, my commitment to facts, and my refusal to be complicit in his charade. That detail mattered later. I didn't storm out, didn't make a scene. I simply nodded, a tight, almost imperceptible movement, and then went back to my office. My first action was to secure all my digital files. I copied every report, every email, every data analysis, every communication related to the scaling issues, the client churn, the diverted funds, and especially the Phoenix project's flawed algorithm. I saved them to an encrypted external drive, then backed them up again. I made sure to include the dates and times of every interaction, every warning I'd given, every dismissal I'd received. I also started keeping a physical journal, noting down key conversations, dates, and witnesses. It felt like I was building a case, not just for myself, but for the truth. I continued my work, outwardly calm, even cooperative. Harrison, believing he had put me in my place, began to give me the cold shoulder, communicating mostly through Mark. He initiated a formal, performance improvement plan for me, citing lack of strategic alignment and negative impact on team morale. It was a transparent attempt to build a paper trail for my eventual termination. I meticulously documented my compliance with the plan, while simultaneously gathering more evidence of the operational failures that continued to mount due to his decisions. I knew I couldn't go to HR, they reported directly to Harrison. I needed to go higher. My target became the board of directors, specifically Eleanor Vance, the chair of the audit committee. Eleanor was a well-respected figure in the tech industry, known for her sharp mind and unwavering ethical standards. She wasn't an investor looking for a quick exit, she was genuinely invested in the long-term health and reputation of Veridian Solutions. I spent weeks refining my evidence, organizing it into a clear, concise narrative. I didn't frame it as a personal grievance, but as a critical risk assessment for the company, backed by irrefutable data. I focused on the Phoenix project's flaws, the client churn, and the financial implications of Harrison's reckless spending and misdirection. My decisive action came on a Tuesday morning. I bypassed Harrison entirely. I emailed Eleanor Vance directly, requesting a confidential meeting to discuss urgent operational and strategic risks to Veridian Solutions. I attached a high-level summary of my concerns, carefully omitting anything that could be dismissed as personal opinion. I knew she would recognize the gravity of what I was implying. Within 2 hours, her assistant called to schedule a meeting for the following afternoon. I spent the rest of the day rehearsing my presentation, making sure every fact was precise, every conclusion supported by evidence. When I walked into Eleanor Vance's office, I carried a single, slim folder. She greeted me warmly, but her expression was serious. I laid out my case calmly, professionally, presenting the data on the Phoenix project's algorithmic bias, the escalating client issues, and the financial implications of Harrison's decisions, all meticulously documented with emails, reports, and internal communications. I showed her how Harrison had systematically ignored warnings, sidelined dissent, and actively obscured the truth from the board. I even included a transcript of the boardroom meeting where he called me a liability, noting the context of my prior warnings about Phoenix. I emphasized that my concern was for the company's future and its ethical obligations to its clients. Eleanor listened, her gaze unwavering, occasionally asking a pointed question. When I finished, she sat in silence for a long moment, tapping a pen against her pad. "Sarah," she finally said, her voice quiet, "this is comprehensive and deeply troubling." She assured me she would launch an immediate, confidential internal review. She thanked me for my courage and discretion. I left her office feeling a profound sense of relief, but also a quiet certainty that the battle was far from over. The aftermath began quickly. Within days, I noticed a shift. Mark, Harrison's protégé, was suddenly less visible. Harrison himself seemed agitated, his forced smiles more brittle than usual. A week later, I received an email from Eleanor Vance, informing me that an independent auditor would be reviewing the Phoenix project and our operational metrics, and that I would be a key resource for their investigation. Harrison, I learned through the grapevine, was furious, but he couldn't openly challenge an audit committee directive. He tried to isolate me further, but it was too late. My documentation was already in the hands of the board. The investigation lasted for several weeks. I provided the auditors with everything I had, calmly and factually. Harrison, meanwhile, was forced to account for his decisions, his dismissals, and his attempts to push through a flawed product. He was blindsided, having believed he had successfully suppressed all dissent. He never expected that the liability he sought to remove would meticulously gather the evidence that would unravel his carefully constructed narrative. The board's findings were damning. The Phoenix project was shelved indefinitely, a massive financial write-off. Harrison's mismanagement of operational funds and his deliberate suppression of critical information were laid bare. 2 months after he called me a liability, Harrison was asked to resign. The announcement cited differences in strategic vision and a need for new leadership. He vanished from Veridian Solutions as quickly as he'd tried to erase me. I didn't feel triumphant, not exactly. There was a quiet satisfaction, a sense of justice, but also a weariness. The company, however, began a slow process of healing. Eleanor Vance personally offered me a new role, head of risk management and compliance, reporting directly to the board, with a mandate to rebuild trust and integrity. It was a role I accepted, knowing the work ahead would be immense. A few weeks after Harrison's departure, I was in the break room, making myself a cup of coffee. I noticed a box of discarded items from Harrison's old office, waiting for charity pickup. On top, nestled among some old binders, was one of his pristine, company-branded coffee mugs. The same kind he'd always held, half filled with lukewarm tea, as he dismissed my concerns. I picked it up, feeling its smooth, cool weight in my hand. It was just a mug, but it felt different now. A symbol of a different kind of leadership, a different kind of power. I put it in the dishwasher, intending to use it myself.